Ever watch a news program that was reporting on a fatal accident, maybe a shooting, maybe it was a natural disaster, and right before they show footage of the scene, they say something along the lines of, "This may contain graphic images." Or maybe you were innocently scrolling through your Facebook newsfeed and you come across a super zoomed in video of pimples being popped, and as you sit there gagging, you wonder why you're friends with the poster. That's the simplest form of a trigger warning. And by the end of the speech, you'll understand what a trigger warning is and safe spaces on college campuses are, and why, when used properly, are beneficial to students, particularly those recovering from a trauma. So, first, I'm going to show you a quick definition of trigger warnings and safe spaces and how they are currently being used. Second, I'll explain what a victim of trauma experiences without trigger warnings and safe spaces. Then we'll finish up with how to properly use trigger warnings and safe spaces to help a student recovering from a trauma. Here we go. So, trigger warnings were originally used on blog posts to inform potential readers that the post would be discussing topics that could cause triggers to those with post traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. The idea expanded to college campuses. Professors could put in the syllabi that the class would discuss a certain subject, so victims of intense trauma could prepare themselves for the subject. Similarly, safe spaces stepped on the scene when many women and colored people first began attending college before it was widely accepted. Safe spaces were rooms on campus where a colored person, for example, could go and seek the comfort of other colored people without worrying about bullies or anything else. Um, this kind of expanded to places where rape survivors or victims of intense trauma could go and seek encouragement from others who knew what it was like to go through what they were going through. And unfortunately, today across many U.S. college campuses, trigger warnings and safe spaces are being used for those who may just find a topic offensive because it goes against their personal or religious beliefs. However, there's a very real difference between a state of panic and anxiety as a result of PTSD, whether it's diagnosed or not, that's caused by trauma, and disagreeing with the topic because it differs from your beliefs. I say this from a personal experience. I was sexually assaulted several times, raped, attempted kidnapping, stalked, and choked throughout my late teen years. I had years where I would avoid certain areas because they reminded me of my attacker. Um, you couldn't sneak up behind me or touch me at all. A tap on the shoulder would just send me through the roof. When I first attended community college after graduating high school, trigger warnings were not used, and a class discussion on rape or rape culture would just leave me breathless. I would feel a tightness in my chest, my heart would start racing, and I would have trouble breathing. I wouldn't be able to think clearly, and I'd feel as if the walls were collapsing on me. This is what PTSD, anxiety, and panic does to a person who suffered a trauma. Um, Much to contrary belief, trigger warnings in safe spaces does not mean the student is excused from class. Their presence is still required. The material will still be on the test. Kate Main says that she's a professor of philosophy at Cornell University, says, with appropriate warnings in place, vulnerable students may be able to employ effective anxiety management techniques and by meditating or taking prescribed medications. And psychotherapists suggest that controlled exposures to topics that are triggers will in fact help a victim overcome their trauma. Another professor puts it like this in her syllabi. As I discuss this very topic, very difficult subject matter, please do what you need to take care of yourself. You may need to take up a different position, engage in some manual activity. Knitters, feel free to take out your work. Or you may simply need to leave. This is an accessible presentation, which means I'll be doing such things as describing visual images and offering copies of the talk. Having a copy is useful not only for those who may have a difficulty hearing the talk in the mode I'm using, which is primarily oral. It may also be useful to those who need to receive the information in a different time and place, for reasons ranging from physical barriers due to this location to experience traumatic flashbacks. So, trigger warnings are heads up in the syllabi, potential triggering topics to students who are recovering from intense trauma. And safe spaces are places where victims can gather with peers who have also dealt with similar um, trauma so they can have a support system. I counted 15 rapes or attempted rapes in Stockton between October 1st and November 16th, one just off of Delta's campus. I can't begin to count the other assaults that happen daily in the city alone, let alone the rest of the country. College age students suffer and are recovering from traumatic experiences on the daily, and we can easily be a help rather than a hindrance. With the proper use of trigger warnings and safe spaces, we can show support to our fellow students who may be struggling with PTSD, anxiety disorder, or panic disorder. We may still face topics contrary to our own beliefs, and we may disagree with each other's opinions, but victims of trauma don't have to live in fear any longer, and they will overcome their PTSD.